Imagine a tree that breathes, whispers secrets, and holds the wisdom of ages. What if this ancient talking giant chose an orphaned girl as its only confidant? Prepare to discover a bond so profound it defies imagination and reshapes the very meaning of family. The village of Akarini lay on the edge of the vast Sahel, where acacia trees competed with baobabs for dominance of the landscape. It was a place of tradition, routine, and unspoken hierarchies. Children belonged to families, families belonged to the village, and the village belonged to the rhythms of the seasons. There was no room for those who fell between the cracks. Amara had fallen through such cracks when she was 7 years old. Her mother had succumbed to fever during the dry season, and her father, a traveling trader, had never returned from a journey to the northern markets. The extended family structure that once seemed so secure crumbled like sun-baked clay. Her grandmother, already overburdened with the care of 3 other children, offered her a mat in a corner and a portion of the evening meal, but nothing more. The unspoken message was clear. Amara was a burden, a mouth to feed, a reminder of hardship. By the time Amara turned 15, she had learned to make herself small and useful. She rose before dawn to fetch water from the well, spent her days gathering firewood and tending the household gardens, and asked for nothing beyond the meager sustenance she received. Her grandmother had grown fond of her in the way one becomes fond of a reliable ox, with appreciation for its labor, but without particular affection. The other children, her cousins, barely acknowledged her existence. They had their own lives, their own futures, their own dreams that did not include a hollow-eyed orphan girl with scars on her palms from years of gathering thorns. Amara had learned not to dream. She had learned that hope was a luxury reserved for those with family, with prospects, with names that carried weight. She moved through her days like a ghost, present but not truly seen. The baobab tree stood approximately 2 kilometers from the village, at the edge of cultivated lands where the Sahel began to reassert its dominion over human efforts. It was ancient beyond measure. Locals spoke of their grandparents' climbing its lower branches as children. The trunk was impossibly thick, wider than any 3 huts placed side by side, and its branches spread outward like the fingers of an elderly hand, gnarled but still reaching. Everyone in the village knew the tree, but few visited it. It was considered a natural landmark, a guide point when traveling, a symbol of permanence in an impermanent world. Amara had always been drawn to it, though she could not articulate why. Perhaps it was because the tree seemed as out of place as she did. Too large for its location, too ancient for the transient human dramas that unfolded at its base. She would find excuses to walk past it on the pretense of gathering fuel or hunting for edible plants. Eventually, she began to visit it deliberately, sitting in its vast shadow during the hottest part of the day when no one else would venture out. It was during one such visit that everything changed. Amara had been sitting with her back against the baobab's trunk, her eyes closed against the relentless heat, when she heard a voice that seemed to come from the earth itself. "You sit very still," the voice said. "For a human, that is unusual." Amara's eyes snapped open. She looked around the empty landscape, seeing no one. The voice had been deep and sonorous, with an undertone like wind moving through canyon walls. She rose slowly, uncertain whether heat and exhaustion had finally broken something in her mind. "Here," the voice continued, and Amara realized it was emanating from the tree itself, not from the branches or leaves, but from the trunk, as though the baobab itself was speaking. "I apologize for startling you. It has been many years since anyone has remained here long enough to hear me. Most people merely pass by." Amara should have been terrified. Instead, she found herself sinking back down to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Perhaps she had finally lost her mind. Perhaps it did not matter. At least the baobab's voice was gentle, and it had acknowledged her existence. It was more than anyone in the village had done in years. "Are you real?" she whispered. "I am as real as any being that has stood in one place for 300 years, the baobab replied. "Though I understand that humans often question the reality of things that do not fit neatly into their expectations. Tell me, child, what is your name?" "Amara," she replied, though she was not yet convinced she was not speaking to her own fractured consciousness. "I am called Amara." Amara, the Baobab repeated, and the word seemed to resonate through the ground beneath her. A strong name. It means graceful in some tongues, though I suspect you have had little opportunity to be graceful. You carry grief like stones in your pockets, child. I can feel it in the way you sit, in the way you breathe. Why do you come to this tree, Amara? Amara did not know how to answer. She had not articulated it even to herself. But sitting at the base of this impossible talking tree, she found honesty spilling from her lips. Because no one looks at me, she said. Because here, I can be. You can indeed, the Baobab agreed. In fact, I insist upon it. You will come here whenever you need to be, Amara, and I will listen. I have nothing but time, and you, it seems, have nothing but pain. Perhaps we can be of use to each other. Over the following months, Amara's life bifurcated into two distinct realities. In the village, she remained the silent, tireless girl who asked nothing and expected nothing. But in the shadow of the Baobab, she became something entirely different. She became heard. The Baobab, who revealed his name was Okonkwo, drew her, out slowly and with infinite patience. He asked about her childhood, her mother, her father. He listened to stories she had never told anyone, tales of small joys and large heartbreaks that she had swallowed down for years. In return, he told her things. Not stories exactly, but observations accumulated over 3 centuries of watching. He told her about the land itself, how it breathed and moved in cycles that humans barely recognized. He spoke of the generations of people who had lived and died in his sight, the dramas that had seemed all-consuming and were now dust. He taught her about the interconnectedness of all things, how a tree and a girl, seemingly isolated, were actually part of an intricate web of relationships and dependencies that stretched across time and space. You think you are alone, Okonkwo said one afternoon as Amara rested against his trunk, but you are connected to everything around you. The water you drink has traveled through centuries. The air you breathe carries the stories of ancestors. Your grief is real, child, but it is not unique to you. It is part of the great cycle of suffering and endurance that all living things must navigate. This does not diminish your pain, but it places it in a context larger than yourself. Is that supposed to help? Amara asked, though she was not entirely flippant. Over the months, she had come to love Okonkwo's philosophical ruminations, even when they confused her. It is not meant to help you escape your pain, Okonkwo replied. That is not wisdom's purpose. Rather, it is meant to help you understand that you are not destroyed by it. You have survived thus far. This is no small thing. Amara spent her 16th year living between 2 worlds. In the village, she was still largely invisible, but she no longer experienced her invisibility as a wound. She moved through her tasks with purpose, understanding that she was part of the larger ecosystem of the household and the village. She observed her grandmother with new eyes and saw not coldness but exhaustion, not rejection but the natural priority of one's own children. She watched her cousins and no longer resented their indifference. She understood it as the simple self-interest of youth. But her true life, she came to believe, was with Okonkwo. As the seasons turned, Amara brought small offerings to the tree, a bowl of water during the driest periods, seeds that she had saved from the household stores, planting them in the soil around Okonkwo's roots. She fashioned a small shelter from fallen branches, a place where she could sit more comfortably during rain. Okonkwo seemed to grow stronger, his leaves becoming more vibrant, his branches reaching higher. You care for me well, he observed one day. It is unusual for humans. Most take without consideration for replenishment. You have cared for me, Amara said simply. It seems only right to reciprocate. One evening, as the sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, Okonkwo asked Amara about her future. The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, she asked. My future is determined. I will stay in my grandmother's household until I am married off to some farmer or trader from a neighboring village. I will bear children and tend fields and eventually become the elder woman who teaches the younger women how to grind grain and make cloth. This is the path of women in my village. Is this what you want? Okonkwo pressed. What I want does not matter, Amara replied, but her voice wavered slightly. That is where you are wrong, Okonkwo said, and his voice held a note she had not heard before, something that sounded like anger, though it seemed directed at the world rather than at her. What you want matters enormously. You have been taught to believe otherwise, but it is a lie, Amara. You are not an object to be moved from hand to hand. You are a person with your own will, your own dreams, your own purpose. I do not have dreams, Amara said quietly. I stopped allowing myself to have them years ago. Then perhaps, Okonkwo suggested, it is time to begin again. Over the following months, Okonkwo became more than a confidant. He became a teacher. He taught Amara the medicinal properties of plants, knowledge accumulated through his observation of centuries of healers and herbalists who had gathered plants in his shade. He taught her to read the weather in the shifting of winds, to understand which seasons would bring plenty and which would bring scarcity. He taught her to see patterns in the chaos of daily life, to recognize that what seemed random often followed deeper rules. This knowledge will be your freedom, Okonkwo explained. A person who understands the natural world and how to work with it cannot be easily controlled. You will have value that extends beyond what others believe you should be. Amara found herself beginning to imagine a different life. She did not have a clear picture of what it might look like, but she felt something stirring within her, a sense of possibility that had long been dormant. The crisis came in her 17th year, during the season when the rains failed. The Sahel had been under increasing pressure, with each year bringing less reliable moisture and more intense drought. This year was catastrophic. The fields died before they could truly grow. The wells began to run dry. Hunger settled over the village like a suffocating blanket. Amara's grandmother, normally stern but reliable, became increasingly desperate. One evening, she announced that she had arranged for Amara to be married to a man from a distant village, a wealthy trader who was willing to pay a substantial bride price. The marriage would take place at the next full moon. With the money he paid for Amara, the family could purchase grain and water to survive the drought. Amara was to be sold. The realization struck her like a physical blow. She had always known that this was a possibility, but she had allowed herself to hope that perhaps, somehow, things might be different. She thought of the trader from the distant village, a man twice her age whom she had never met, and felt something crystallize within her. That night, she crept away from her grandmother's house and made her way to Okonkwo in darkness. She found him by the light of stars and threw herself against his trunk, weeping with a ferocity that seemed to come from the depths of her being. I cannot do this, she gasped. I cannot be traded like a bolt of cloth. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. What will you do, Amara? You are a young woman with no family, no resources, no position in society. The world does not make space for such people to refuse the paths laid out before them. Then I will make space, Amara said with a ferocity that surprised even herself. You told me I had value, that I could be free. Help me. Tell me what to do. Again, Okonkwo was silent. Amara could almost feel him thinking, his consciousness vast and ancient, moving through possibilities. Finally he spoke. There is a way, though it will require great courage. The town of Kumasi lies 4 days' journey to the south. It is a place of traders and scholars, where knowledge is valued and people's origins matter less than what they can contribute. There is a woman there named Adeyemi, a healer of great renown. She has visited me in years past, and she understands the ways of the natural world as few humans do. If you can reach her, I believe she would take you as an apprentice. With her, you could build a life of your own making. 4 days' journey? Amara breathed. I have never traveled alone. I do not have provisions. I will provide what I can, Okonkwo said. My roots go deep, and there are seeds and tubers stored in my being that I can release for you. There is also a pouch that has been left in my hollow, a gift from a traveler years ago, forgotten but preserved. You will not travel entirely unprepared. Okonkwo guided her to a hollow in his massive trunk that Amara had never noticed before. Inside, wrapped in cloth that had preserved it remarkably well, was a leather pouch containing dried meat, grain, and a small amount of currency in the form of cowrie shells and coins. This man who left this was running from injustice, Okonkwo explained. He told me his story one evening, much as you have told me yours. I suspect he would not mind if his forgotten provisions were used to save a life. Amara packed the pouch carefully and prepared herself to leave. But before she departed, she stood before the great tree and placed her hands on his bark. "How can I repay what you have given me?" she asked. "By living fully," Okonkwo replied. "By using the freedom you have fought for to do good in the world. By remembering that you are part of this great web of life, and that your actions ripple outward in ways you cannot fully comprehend. This is all the repayment I require." Amara left the village that night, and only she knew where she had gone. By the time her grandmother realized she was missing, Amara was already 2 days' journey south. The family was devastated by the lost bride price, but eventually they moved on, as humans do. Amara reached Kumasi in early morning light, and by midday she had found Adeyemi's home at the edge of the city. The healer was a woman of indeterminate age, with kind eyes and hands stained perpetually with the juices of various plants. When Amara explained where she came from and how Okonkwo had sent her, Adeyemi smiled. "Ah," she said, "so the old Baobab still watches over people, even after 300 years. I have often wondered. Come, child. I have been expecting someone, though I did not know it would be you. We have much work to do." Amara worked as Adeyemi's apprentice for 5 years, learning and growing until she became a healer in her own right. She eventually established her own practice in a neighboring city, becoming known for her unusual knowledge of plant medicines and her ability to treat conditions that baffled other healers. She achieved a kind of independence that was remarkable for a woman of her time and circumstances. But she never forgot Okonkwo, and she never forgot the fundamental lesson he had taught her, that she was not merely an object to be acted upon, but a person with her own will, her own value, and her own power to shape her destiny. Every year, on the anniversary of her escape, Amara would make a journey back to the Sahel and stand once more in the shadow of the great Baobab. She would bring gifts, seeds, water, offerings, and she would sit beneath his branches and tell him of her life, her victories, and her continued struggles. And Okonkwo would listen, as he always had, his ancient consciousness bearing witness to the life she had built from nothing. Other people eventually learned of the unusual relationship between the orphan girl and the ancient tree. Stories began to circulate, some claiming she had learned magic from the Baobab, others suggesting she had made a bargain with spirits. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any supernatural explanation. A person had seen another being and chosen to listen. That listening had transformed them both. In a world where she had nothing, Amara found everything in an unexpected friend, a magnificent, talking baobab tree. This is not merely a story about an orphan girl or a tree with wisdom beyond measure. It is a journey into the deepest corners of the human heart, revealing how love, wisdom, and an unbreakable bond can blossom in the most extraordinary circumstances. Amara's transformation demonstrates that family is not determined solely by blood or social convention, but by those who see us, listen to us, and believe in our potential. The Baobab, rooted in one place, nevertheless changed her entire world by offering what everyone else had withheld: recognition of her inherent worth. In return, Amara provided what the ancient tree had lacked: a connection to the human world. Evidence that his wisdom was not squandered but could genuinely alter lives. Their story is a testament to the power of being truly heard, and a reminder that the most profound transformations often come not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of compassion and connection. When we choose to see others, truly see them, and when we are willing to be seen in return, we create the possibility for bonds that transcend the boundaries of species, circumstance, and expectation. This is the deepest magic of all.